Have you ever noticed how a simple gesture, like a woman running her fingers through her hair or tossing it just so, can suddenly shift the entire energy of a room? Maybe you've caught yourself staring, wondering what exactly that small movement does, why it feels magnetic, almost hypnotic. It's funny, right? How something as ordinary as playing with hair can stir up feelings we didn't expect. What she doesn't realize is that beneath that effortless flick lies a whole complex conversation of attraction and psychology playing out silently. I remember once being at a cafe in Brooklyn, the kind where the air smells faintly of roasted coffee beans mixed with old books. A woman sat nearby, casually twirling strands of her auburn hair around her finger as she glanced at her phone. At first, it seemed like nothing special, just a nervous habit maybe. But then something shifted in my attention. I wasn't just observing anymore, I was drawn in by this small ritual. And I swear, the way she did it was inviting without words, almost like an unspoken hello. But what really happens when she makes that movement with her hair? Why does it hold such power? Let's slow down and unravel this step by step because there's more here than just flirtation or vanity. This simple act taps into deeper psychological patterns and evolutionary cues deeply embedded in human behavior. And understanding this helps us not only read others better but also see parts of ourselves we might overlook. When someone touches or plays with their hair in a social setting, especially in moments where attraction is possible, it often serves as a subtle signal rooted in human biology and psychology. It acts like a bridge between vulnerability and confidence. On one hand, it's somewhat protective. Fiddling with hair can soothe nerves when feeling exposed or uncertain. On the other hand, it can be deliberately expressive, consciously or not, drawing attention to features associated historically with health and vitality. Think about it. Hair frames the face. Healthy-looking hair has long been linked to youthfulness and well-being across cultures. So when she flips or adjusts it just right, even if casually, she's highlighting an aspect of herself tied to those positive signals. But here's where things get tricky, or rather fascinating. This behavior exists on both conscious and unconscious levels simultaneously. She might think she's just fixing her bangs or brushing stray strands away from her eyes. Yet unconsciously, she might be communicating openness or interest without saying a word. That tug on the hair becomes an invitation wrapped inside ambiguity. Is she nervous? Is she signaling attraction? Or maybe just lost in thought? A graphic designer named Claire from Portland once shared with me how during a work meeting via Zoom last year, when video calls became our new normal, she noticed herself frequently touching her hair while speaking to clients she found intimidating. It started as an unconscious response to stress but gradually morphed into a tool for connection. By occasionally tucking hair behind her ear when receiving compliments or nodding along, Claire observed that people seemed more engaged with her ideas. Here's what stands out. Playing with hair isn't merely decorative, it's relational and dynamic. The physical action intertwines with emotional state, social context, and even personal history. This aligns closely with concepts Carl Jung explored about human behavior being influenced by hidden layers inside us, the unconscious mind carrying symbols and impulses shaping how we present ourselves without fully realizing why. If you pause and observe carefully, not just others but your own gestures, you might recognize these subtle signs revealing internal dialogues about confidence, vulnerability, desire for acceptance, or even attempts to mask discomfort. So how do you make sense of this without turning every gesture into some codebreaker puzzle? Start small. Try this simple exercise next time you find yourself interacting with someone you feel drawn to, or even when you're alone reflecting on your emotions. First, notice if you play with your own hair during conversations or moments of self-reflection. Don't judge. Just observe what comes up emotionally at those times. Is there nervousness? Confidence? Boredom? Excitement? Then gently experiment by altering that habit slightly. If you usually tuck your hair behind your ear when anxious, try holding your hands calmly instead. See if that changes how you feel internally or how others respond around you. Or conversely, if you rarely touch your hair but want to test its social effect, without forcing it awkwardly, introduce subtle movements like briefly brushing strands away during introductions or pauses in dialogue. The goal isn't manipulation but increasing awareness, helping you tune into how nonverbal signals communicate states of mind beyond words. And yes, this works both ways. For those trying to understand attraction signals directed at them and for anyone curious about their own behaviors influencing social connection unconsciously. You might be surprised to discover that what seemed insignificant is actually part of a nuanced dance between inner feelings and outer expressions. A dance humans have been performing since long before words existed. It reminds me somewhat ironically of trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze trying to force meaning onto these gestures, the more elusive they become. But when approached lightly, like watching ripples form naturally on a pond surface, they reveal layers worth noticing quietly over time. Now before we move forward exploring more layers behind this fascinating topic, if anything I've shared so far resonates with you, maybe sparks curiosity or helps explain something you've sensed intuitively, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel because there are deeper conversations ahead waiting for exactly those moments when subtlety meets meaning. Anyway, back to this first piece. There's another layer here about self-image intertwined with these gestures involving hair. And sometimes that relationship is messy because it taps into personal stories about beauty standards, self-esteem struggles, or identity presentation struggles too complex for quick fixes but important nonetheless. Imagine someone growing up hearing messages that their natural appearance wasn't quite right, according to family expectations or cultural norms. A woman named Lena from Miami once confided feeling torn between wanting to embrace curly wild locks versus smoothing them down daily because of workplace pressures. The way Lena interacted physically with her hair changed throughout different environments depending on which version of herself felt safer showing up at that moment. This shows us how such seemingly small movements carry echoes from our past influencing present interaction patterns, not only socially but internally within ourselves too. So paying attention here invites kindness toward whatever relationship each person holds with their body and appearance habits, because attraction isn't superficial alone. It's deeply tied into how we accept, or reject, parts of who we are beneath the surface glimpsed by others through actions like flipping hair absent-mindedly yet loaded symbolically nonetheless. And thinking practically again, try jotting down moments over a few days when either you notice someone doing this gesture around you, or yourself doing it. And note what emotions arise alongside those instances: curiosity, discomfort, warmth. It helps build emotional literacy linked directly to real-life interactions instead of abstract concepts floating somewhere distant from daily experience. That kind of mindful noticing allows insight into not only how attraction functions but also how subtle body language operates as part of an ongoing dialogue between inner truths and outer realities. A place where personality traits meet instinctual signaling, often overlooked but vital for authentic connection. I have no doubt some people watching right now will recall their own version of these stories. Whether from dating situations gone unexpectedly well, or badly, casual encounters sparking surprise interest out of nowhere, or quiet moments alone wondering why a simple twist of hair sometimes makes all the difference between feeling seen versus invisible. It would be great if you share any experiences like that below because these everyday dramas reveal powerful threads weaving through human connection more than we usually give credit for. And talking openly about them brings understanding closer within reach than guessing silently behind smiles or glances could ever do alone. Anyway, now I'm curious. Have you ever caught yourself doing this without realizing why? Or noticed someone else whose gesture felt strangely compelling beyond mere appearance? There's more coming next time about why certain settings amplify these signals unpredictably. Hint: technology plays tricks on our perception too. So stick around for insights blending psychology with everyday modern quirks nobody really talks about much yet. For now though, observe gently next chance you get. Noticing small movements like these can open surprising doors into understanding attraction beyond clichés, which feels oddly refreshing instead of frustratingly mysterious after all this time talking around it already. Commenta isua experiencia com esses sinais não verbais que passam despercebidos mas falam tanto por si só. It's interesting how those small hair gestures open a window into unspoken communication, but there's an even more intricate layer often overlooked. How movement with the hair can act as a subtle form of self-expression signaling emotional states or intentions beyond attraction alone. We tend to associate these actions mostly with flirtation or nervousness, yet they can also serve as a way to negotiate personal boundaries and display inner resilience. Take Maya, for instance, a software engineer from Austin I talked to last summer. She described how in high-pressure meetings she often found herself unconsciously twisting strands of her hair around her finger, not quite the casual flick or toss we talked about earlier, but more repetitive and focused. At first glance, it looked like mere habit. But for Maya, it was a grounding ritual amid the chaos. A way to regain composure when feeling overwhelmed by technical debates or when her voice seemed drowned out by louder colleagues. What struck me was that this hair movement became a nonverbal tool for reclaiming space in social settings where Maya felt invisible or unheard. It signaled something different than, "I'm interested," or, "I'm nervous." Instead, it said, "I exist here. I am holding myself together." She didn't have to speak this explicitly. The gesture carried that message silently. This introduces an important point. Gestures involving hair aren't always about attracting others. Sometimes they're about maintaining connection with oneself when external circumstances feel threatening or alienating. In fact, this ties into how our bodies serve as ongoing storytellers of experience. Hair movements become chapters in that story, sometimes chapters of confidence and allure, other times narratives of protection and endurance. If you think about it, this is not so different from how people bite their nails or tap fingers, actions we might dismiss as fidgeting but are deeply linked with managing internal states. So here's a practical approach you can experiment with if you catch yourself playing with your hair during stressful moments. Next time you notice that impulse creeping in, whether twisting, tugging, or brushing strands repeatedly, pause briefly and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Am I trying to soothe anxiety? Am I seeking presence in this space? Or maybe signaling fatigue? Rather than pushing the behavior away as distracting or embarrassing, and yes, many of us have fallen into self-criticism around such habits. Try embracing it as a cue pointing toward your emotional needs at that moment. This simple shift from judgment to curiosity creates room for gentler self-awareness without needing immediate solutions. You might find writing down those observations helpful too. Jotting notes like, twisted hair during call, felt overwhelmed, or brushed hair away while listening, felt disconnected. Over days, this builds a personal map connecting body signals with inner feelings, allowing clearer understanding of how physical habits reveal psychological rhythms uniquely yours. This exercise doesn't aim to eliminate the gestures but rather deepen your relationship with them, helping transform automatic reactions into conscious conversations between mind and body. Now here's where this gets even more layered. These hair-related signals don't just emerge randomly. They interact dynamically with social context and perceived power dynamics. Consider Leo, a 29-year-old actor living in Chicago who shared his observation about watching women on stage during rehearsals. He noticed some performers would deliberately sweep their hair back sharply before delivering lines expressing strength or defiance, almost like armor preparation, whereas others used soft touches along their necks when portraying vulnerability. The fascinating part wasn't just the contrast between characters but how those gestures shifted audience perception subtly despite being secondary to spoken dialogue. Leo realized these movements worked as extensions of character expression, physically manifesting internal emotional changes that words alone couldn't fully convey. That got me thinking about real life. Outside theater lights and scripts, we all perform roles influenced by social expectations, roles requiring varying degrees of assertiveness or submission depending on setting, workplace meetings versus casual hangouts versus intimate conversations. Hair gestures often become part of this performance repertoire, whether consciously adopted or unconsciously repeated from past experiences. So how can you tap into this awareness practically? Try imagining a scenario where you want to project calm authority yet feel internally uncertain, a common contradiction many face before presentations or tough discussions. Experiment by intentionally adjusting your usual hair habits during these moments. If you normally fiddle nervously, instead try smoothing back your hair gently once or twice before speaking, as if signaling readiness, not aggressively but purposefully. Notice how this small act influences not only how others perceive you but also shifts your internal state slightly toward steadiness. Or conversely, if you tend towards stiffness under pressure, suppressing any natural movements, including those involving hair, allow yourself brief moments during pauses to touch your neck lightly or tuck strands behind ears softly. Tiny permissions releasing tension rather than concealing it completely. These adjustments aren't magic fixes but tools amplifying self-expression aligned more authentically with desired emotional tone within social exchanges instead of habitual reflexes unconsciously performed. And yes, give yourself grace if initial attempts feel awkward. It's normal when rewiring body language patterns formed over years shaped by countless experiences, both conscious and hidden deep inside psyche layers described richly in Jungian psychology relating symbols to personal growth paths. By experimenting playfully yet mindfully with these micromovements connected to hair and broader bodily cues, you cultivate richer communication channels bridging inner states and outer world interaction, helping forge genuine connection rather than masked posturing rooted in fear or insecurity. Switching gears slightly brings us into another captivating dimension, connected yet distinct: the interplay between cultural myths around hair and attraction shaping personal identity beneath visible gestures themselves. Take Zara from Toronto, who grew up immersed in Middle Eastern traditions valuing long flowing hair symbolizing femininity and beauty but also modesty, bound by strict social codes governing public appearance especially for women her age during adolescence. Zara described feeling torn between embracing inherited symbolism tied deeply to family history versus contemporary urban lifestyle expressing individuality through hairstyles ranging from shaved sides to vibrant colors reflecting rebellion against imposed norms. When she runs hands through her multicolored curls today, which she does freely among friends, it carries layers far beyond simple grooming. It's an act reclaiming autonomy wrapped up in ancestral legacies, meeting modern self-definition simultaneously expressed physically through movement as well as emotionally through intention behind gesture itself. Understanding these cultural narratives helps frame why certain actions involving hair evoke strong feelings both within oneself and in observers, not merely because biology predisposes attraction signals, but because collective stories imbue those signals with meaning far deeper than surface appearances suggest. Reflect on what cultural associations might influence your own habits related to hair touching or styling. Is there any tension between inherited ideas about beauty versus personal preference? How do these beliefs shape what feels comfortable versus performative? An exercise here involves picking one hairstyle meaningful either personally or culturally, then journaling freely about memories linked with it, positive emotions tangled with restrictions experienced, or desires expressed through changing styles over time, blending past identity fragments shaping present self-image mosaics unique only to you. Sharing such reflections quietly enriches self-knowledge, revealing undercurrents beneath visible cues often mistaken solely for attraction games rather than complex identity negotiations ongoing beneath everyday expressions, including those subtle twirls and tucks previously glanced over quickly without much thought given later on. So next time you see someone adjusting their hairstyle mid-conversation, or catch yourself doing it, pause for just a moment longer, noticing possible stories behind those movements. Stories woven from biology interlaced tightly with culture, layered again by individual psychological history, creating rich tapestries signaling far more than simple interest, sparks glowing briefly then fading away unnoticed, usually by all except sensitive eyes willing to look beneath fleeting impressions toward deeper understanding, waiting patiently beneath surface motions often dismissed casually yet loaded profoundly nonetheless. And speaking of subtle layers interacting invisibly, there's another angle I find compelling related specifically to timing, the rhythm behind these hair gestures influencing their impact differently depending on when they occur within social exchanges. But hey, no spoilers just yet. Stay curious because unraveling these patterns reveals surprisingly intricate choreography playing out constantly around us, blending instinctive urges alongside learned habits, evolving individually while shaped collectively too. A dance endlessly intriguing, bridging psychology and everyday human experience often glossed over despite its significance, underpinning countless relationships quietly unfolding all around every day everywhere we go. If any part of this resonates so far, or sparks questions about your own experiences, I'd be really interested hearing what situations bring out these kind of nonverbal cues for you personally. Comenta I suas historias mais inesperadas envolvendo simples gestos que revelaram muito mais do que palavras poderiam dizer. There's one last aspect that often slips under the radar when we think about hair gestures and attraction: how these movements interact with the element of surprise or unpredictability in human connection. It's not just what is done, but when and how suddenly it happens that can ignite a spark or shift energy profoundly. Timing, in this sense, becomes almost as important as the gesture itself. I remember a story shared by Daniel, a bartender from New Orleans, who observed this phenomenon repeatedly on busy Friday nights. He noticed how certain women would casually flip their hair only after locking eyes with someone across the room, not immediately upon entering or sitting down, but at just the right moment when attention was already captured subtly. That unexpected flick, almost like punctuation in a conversation without words, seemed to convey an electric invitation layered with playfulness and confidence. What struck Daniel was how this slight delay amplified impact. The hair flip wasn't just a random act but strategically timed, even if unconsciously, to heighten curiosity and allure precisely when social tension was ripe for release. It reminded me how in everyday interactions we often underestimate the power of rhythm and pacing embedded within body language. This connects to psychological concepts about anticipation and reward systems in our brains. Unexpected positive signals activate pleasure centers more intensely than predictable behaviors because they break monotony, keeping engagement alive. Here's a practical way you can experiment with this insight. Next time you're in a social situation where you want to express openness or interest, try introducing subtle hair movements. But instead of doing them reflexively or habitually, play with timing. Hold still for a beat longer than usual before making the move. Notice if that changes how people respond or how you feel internally about your presence. This isn't about gimmicks or calculated manipulation. It's about becoming attuned to natural rhythms within interactions, allowing your nonverbal cues to carry richer emotional undertones simply by respecting timing's role alongside content. Learning to sense these moments requires patience and curiosity but offers rewarding expansion into more mindful communication beyond scripted behaviors many fall into unconsciously daily. Now, imagine blending all these insights, the biological roots of attraction conveyed through hair gestures, their dual role as personal coping mechanisms, cultural meanings interwoven with identity struggles, and finally this nuanced appreciation for timing shaping impact uniquely each time. Together they form an intricate mosaic revealing just how profoundly complex yet accessible our nonverbal language really is. So here's an exercise pulling all these threads together. Observe yourself during a conversation, or even alone, paying attention first to your natural hair-related movements but then intentionally adjusting timing and context as described earlier. Journal afterward what shifts occurred both inside you emotionally and outwardly in responses from others if present. It might feel strange initially, that's perfectly normal, but over time, such mindful practice sharpens emotional intelligence grounded firmly in lived experience rather than abstract theory alone. We rarely pause long enough to appreciate how much meaning lies hidden beneath simple gestures seemingly made without thought. Yet those tiny acts carry histories of survival, desire, culture, identity negotiation, and more waiting patiently to be uncovered when we tune in attentively instead of skimming surfaces superficially. And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway here, not merely learning why she does that thing with her hair or trying to decode every flick as attraction signal, but recognizing how all these layers connect us deeply as human beings navigating complexities both within ourselves and between each other daily. In today's fast-paced world saturated with digital distractions where face-to-face moments grow scarce and often shallow, reclaiming awareness of such subtle communications feels nothing short of revolutionary. It invites slowing down enough to notice not only others' presence but our own embodiment. Our stories silently told through gestures no less powerful because unspoken. If this reflection sparks something for you, a new curiosity about patterns previously overlooked or renewed interest in your own habitual expressions, consider embracing it gently as part of ongoing discovery rather than pressure for immediate mastery. Life seldom offers clear-cut manuals. Instead it hands us fragments inviting assembly into meanings evolving continuously shaped by countless small choices including those playful yet profound movements involving hair many dismiss lightly yet deserving more attentive regard nonetheless. So I leave you now not with answers neatly wrapped up but with an invitation. Watch closely next time someone sways strands behind their ear unexpectedly or pauses just long enough before brushing locks away. Notice what feelings arise inside yourself without rushing judgment or conclusion. Let those moments linger quietly holding space for possibility beyond usual scripts guiding social dance choreographed invisibly beneath everyday interactions everywhere always unfolding anew. Because maybe, just maybe, That simple gesture whispers truths about connection waiting patiently beneath surface, flicks ready when least expected to change everything subtly yet irrevocably. And hey, if any part of this journey made sense, or stirred thoughts, you know where to find me down below. Sharing stories like these doesn't just build community but also honors humanity woven through ordinary acts, revealing extraordinary depths too often hidden in plain sight.